What? A mistaken transfer? $300 million? That kind of loss could bring the company down. Weren't the details checked multiple times? This is what happens when you give important tasks to a mid-career hire. The unbelievable news shook the entire company. It seemed that a female employee who had joined mid-career accidentally made a mistaken transfer of $300 million. In the glass-walled meeting room, she was surrounded like a spectacle, and only the harsh voice of the manager, Michael, echoed throughout. If a mistake like this brings down the company, what are you planning to do to take responsibility? At his reprimand, she, pale and trembling, kept repeating in a faint, hoarse voice, "I am so sorry." Her tear-filled eyes seemed to hold a sense of utter despair. Unable to just stand by and watch, I impulsively stepped into the meeting room. "Wait a moment." I gently pushed through the crowd and supported her shoulders, which looked as if they might collapse. "First, let's check the system to see if there really was mistaken transfer." Hesitantly, she showed me the screen. Rows of numbers and transfer records filled the display. Something felt off. Trusting my intuition, I typed on the keyboard and pulled up the payment information from the other party. There it is. Yes, I've already retrieved it. What? As the meeting room erupted in confusion, I quietly stood up. "Who are you?" she asked with a trembling voice. Just then, the meeting room door burst open, and President Mr. Wilson rushed in, out of breath. "No way. Why are you here?" The president's voice clearly held a note of shock. "Because my true identity is. My name is John Taylor. Lately, I've been working from home. It's not that I'm unemployed, I just work from home, which suits me perfectly. Being able to work at my own pace without interference from anyone is something I wouldn't trade for anything. Between tasks, I brew coffee and look out the window, feeling a sense of peace in the tranquil atmosphere. The freedom of completing everything on my own without being given instructions is relaxing and liberating." One day, I received a message from my colleague, David. "Hey, you should drop by the office sometimes." His words carried a mix of mild exasperation and a warm sense of familiarity. David loves the office atmosphere and enjoys being with his colleagues, so he often invites me to come by. But I wasn't ready to give up the comfort of working from home. Still, I couldn't just ignore his invitation, so I muttered, "Guess I have no choice," and reluctantly headed to the office. When I arrived, I sensed an unusually tense atmosphere. I could hear the employees murmuring anxiously among themselves. Apparently, Mia made a $30 billion mistaken transfer. How did that even happen? Those were the kinds of whispers I overheard. I spotted David and approached him to find out what was going on. "David, what's with the commotion?" "Oh, John, you finally showed up. So, it looks like there was a mistaken transfer of $300 million. $300 million. That's pretty serious." "Yeah, and Michael is trying to pin the blame on Mia, who discovered the mistake." "Mia?" "Right, you probably don't know her. She joined about 6 months ago as a mid-career hire." Following David's pointing finger, I saw a woman standing at the center of the meeting room. "So, that's Mia." She had sleek hair tied back and well-defined features, a beautiful woman. The scene visible through the glass-walled meeting room looked like a witch trial. Led by the manager, Michael, several supervisors surrounded her. Outside of that circle was a ring of employees, watching with curious eyes. She stood at the center of the room, almost like an exhibit on display. "Did you really check it?" Michael's voice echoed beyond the meeting room. His tone clearly carried hostility. "Yes." Mia's response was faint and trembling. I noticed that her fingers holding the documents were shaking slightly. Her face was pale, with a thin layer of sweat on her forehead. "I thought I checked it multiple times." At her words, Michael gave a mocking smirk. "What do you mean, thought? Did you check it properly or not?" I'm... Her expression showed a painful effort to hold back tears. Her lowered eyelashes glistened slightly, hinting at the tears she was trying to suppress. "Do you realize it? We're talking about $300 million. That's far more than the company's annual revenue. How will you take responsibility if this mistake ruins the company? Mia's shoulders shook violently at those words. She was desperately trying not to cry, but that very effort made her distress even more apparent. I am so sorry. A hoarse voice escaped from her lips. If it was going to come to this, we never should have hired you in the first place. Even your resume seems suspicious now. At that statement, Mia's eyes widened and tears spilled over. No, I had reached my limit. Hold on a second. I pushed through the crowd and stepped forward. Standing next to Mia, I supported her trembling shoulders. Could you explain what exactly happened? She looked up at me, bewildered. Mia, it's okay. Tell him what happened. With David's encouragement, Mia started to explain the situation. I thought I checked it properly, but... Got it. Let me see the system logs. I opened my laptop on the spot and began checking the transaction history in the transfer system. As I stared at the strings of numbers displayed on the screen, my conviction grew stronger. This is not a mistaken transfer. The room stirred as I made that declaration. It's an automatic system process where the same transaction was recorded multiple times. The actual transfer amount is $3 million, but it's displayed as 100 times that. The sound of typing echoed through the meeting room. I immediately called the receiving company and explained the situation. Their system also confirmed the same issue, and it turned out that the actual amount received was $3 million, the correct amount. I apologize for the confusion. It was a display error on the system. As I hung up the phone, the atmosphere in the meeting room completely changed. Thank goodness. Really, thank goodness. Mia's eyes welled up again, but this time with tears of relief. Sighs of relief could be heard around the room. The tension in the meeting room eased for a moment, but I furrowed my brows deeply. This incident had exposed a serious flaw in the system. If left unaddressed, the same problem could happen again. We need to review the system. The room fell silent at my words. Call Mr. Wilson. David immediately stood up and left the room. Meanwhile, Mia looked at me with a puzzled expression. Thank you so much. No, I'm just glad it didn't turn into a bigger issue. I can't thank you enough, but... Her voice carried a hint of confusion. Sorry if this sounds rude, but who exactly are you? The other employees, curious as well, leaned in to listen. It was only natural for them to wonder after all. Someone who usually never showed his face had suddenly appeared, resolved a $300 million crisis in minutes, and now demanded to see the president. It was understandable for them to find it strange. Just then, the meeting room door swung open. Oh, John, you actually came. President Thomas Wilson burst into the room, slightly out of breath. Usually a composed and sharp-looking man, today he seemed unusually disheveled. His tie was slightly crooked, and a thin sheen of sweat covered his temple. It's been a while, Thomas. I raised my hand lightly in greeting. It's really good to see you again. I heard about the $300 million situation. My stomach has been hurting all morning because of it. And then I was told that you had solved the problem. Thomas spoke quickly, clutching his chest as he let out a small, relieved breath. Yeah, it was just a system issue. I've already taken care of it, so don't worry. When I said that, Thomas looked visibly relieved, reaching to straighten his crooked tie. As expected of you, John, you're always so reliable. Though I must say, situations like this really take a toll on my heart. Though his voice still carried a bit of tension, it was clear his shoulders had relaxed. You should try to act a bit more dignified as the president. I couldn't help but chuckle, and Thomas scratched his head sheepishly. Sorry. I guess I just lost my composure. Still fidgeting with his tie, Thomas tried to restore his usual polished look. It was rare to see Mr. Wilson, normally so poised, appearing so flustered. But it was clear that the quick resolution of the company's crisis had brought him a great sense of relief. A humble president and an ordinary employee openly pointing things out to him. No matter how you looked at it, It was a strange situation. Mr. Wilson, who is this person? Oh, right. Mia, this is probably your first time meeting him. Clearing his throat, Thomas composed himself and spoke with a more serious tone. This is John Taylor. He's one of the founding members of our company. He also designed the core system infrastructure we use. Do you know CCIE? It's the highest level certification in networking. And he holds it. What? Mr. Wilson looked at me with a nostalgic expression. Since he mostly works from home, you probably didn't know. John was my senior in the university lab. He's far more talented than I am, and I still rely on him for technical matters. Hey, don't say that, Thomas. You're the company president now. I'm just a regular employee. That's right, I'm a founding member, but not an executive or a manager. That was my own decision. When we founded the company more than 10 years ago, I chose to focus entirely on system design and development. Though I was offered executive positions several times, I turned them all down. I genuinely enjoy writing code much more than managing people or making business decisions. Besides, taking on a managerial role would inevitably cut into my free development time. That's why, once the company was on track, I chose to become a regular employee. Though, unlike me, David, also a founding member, remains deeply involved in the company's core operations. As a board member, he plays a vital role in steering the company. Even when I continue working remotely, he frequently checks in, saying things like, "Everyone misses seeing you at the office." It's probably his sense of responsibility and his caring nature. By the way, Mr. Wilson, I have two proposals. First, we need to overhaul the system. To prevent errors like this, I want to completely review the display processing. Mr. Wilson immediately nodded at my words. And the other one? I paused for a moment and looked at Michael, who was standing in the corner of the meeting room with his arms crossed. A review of personnel evaluations. I don't think someone who can't take responsibility for their subordinates' mistakes qualifies as a manager. Michael's face turned pale in an instant. A murmur arose from the surrounding employees. Furthermore, I continued in a calm voice, we need to thoroughly investigate what just happened. The tension in the meeting room grew even thicker. Pressuring Mia unfairly, blaming her without verifying the facts, and making derogatory remarks about her character. This cannot be overlooked. Michael's face stiffened at those words. No, that's not it. I was giving proper guidance. Proper guidance? I cut him off. Then, are you saying that questioning the authenticity of her resume was part of that guidance? The color drained from Michael's face. Yelling without fact-checking, is that what you consider an appropriate decision as a manager? The meeting room fell completely silent, as if struck by a sudden chill. Moreover, those who echoed your comments and made heartless remarks also bear responsibility. I looked around the room. The employees who had been blaming Mia earlier now averted their eyes from me. Mr. Wilson, I looked directly at him. We should take appropriate action against everyone involved in this incident. Additionally, we need to implement harassment training company-wide. Mr. Wilson nodded gravely. You're right. Regarding the consequences, first, Michael's managerial qualifications will be suspended. He will undergo retraining, and his suitability will be reassessed. Michael tried to protest, but Mr. Wilson's stern gaze silenced him. Next, the employees who made inappropriate remarks will be required to submit a written apology and participate in a special training program. Hearing this, the employees involved shrank back. As decided by Mr. Wilson, Michael was suspended from his managerial position for 3 months and was required to complete a rigorous retraining program. The employees who made inappropriate comments also had to go through special training to reflect on their actions. Meanwhile, the system overhaul turned out to be more complex than expected. Since then, I've been coming to the office about 3 times a week. On my way to the development room, I passed through the sales floor and heard a cheerful voice. Good morning, John. The voice belonged to Amelia. Now in her 3rd year at the company, she's known as a top performer in the sales department. Or rather, she used to be known as one. Lately, it seems her performance has been slipping. Good morning. I nodded lightly while noticing her flashy makeup and outfit. Considering the company's dress code, she was definitely pushing the limits. Are you heading to the development room again today? I could make you some tea. Amelia spoke in a sweet, syrupy voice. Ever since she found out that I'm a founding member, she's been openly trying to approach me like this. No, that's not necessary. I firmly declined, but Amelia didn't give up. Oh, come on, you're always so distant. John, you really are interesting. Just then, Mia walked by, holding some documents. The moment Amelia noticed her, her tone changed completely. Oh, Mia, you're still here. About that $300 million incident the other day, that must have been rough. I mean, normally you can't even imagine making such a huge mistake. You must have some seriously thick skin to still be coming to work. Mia's face tensed up for a moment. It felt as if her heart had been stabbed by a needle. That issue has already been resolved, hasn't it? I spoke calmly but firmly. It was a system error, not Mia's fault. That was clearly explained at last week's company-wide meeting. Yeah, but, Amelia. I interrupted her. By the way, have you met your sales target for this month? Amelia's expression stiffened. Well, not yet. Then maybe you should put your energy into improving your performance instead of picking on others. Why not focus on boosting your sales? Amelia was at a loss for words for a moment, then hurriedly retreated to the sales floor. Mia looked at me, letting out a small sigh. Thank you. No problem. I turned to Mia and spoke sincerely. In situations like that, it's better to speak your mind. You didn't do anything wrong, so you should hold your head high. But there's no reason for anyone to blame you. Besides, I paused for a moment before continuing. Actually, it was your careful checking that caught the mistake in the first place. That's an accomplishment. Hearing that, Mia gave a small, relieved smile and said, "Thank you." Her expression showed a hint of genuine relief. John, actually, I always thought it was better to just endure things. I didn't want to hurt anyone or cause any trouble. Her voice carried the weight of the struggles she'd been holding inside. But she continued. But I realized that's not the right way to think. I want to contribute more to this company. I've actually come up with some improvement ideas for the system. Could you take a look? Her eyes, once hesitant, now shone with newfound determination, as if breaking free from the chains of self-restraint. I replied, of course, and looked at her phone. It was filled with bullet-pointed ideas on efficiency improvements, meticulously written. This is impressive. You came up with all of this? Yes. I used to work in system development at my previous job, so I thought maybe I could put that experience to use. But until now, I just didn't feel confident enough to speak up. Though she spoke modestly, her proposals were spot on, well thought out, and practical enough to implement right away. There's no need to hold back. Speak up whenever you have ideas. Just be yourself. I'm sure there are many people who would value your input. Mia widened her eyes slightly, then gave a small, embarrassed smile. From that day on, she started to change, little by little. One day, she approached my desk cautiously and spoke up. John, about this part of the UI. Do you think we could make it a bit more user-friendly? Specifically? The moment I asked, her eyes lit up as if she had been waiting for this, and she eagerly started talking. Yes, for example, the order history flow. I was thinking of placing an order history button on the top page. And then, her voice, filled with enthusiasm, was nothing like her previous reserved tone. She even pulled out a tablet and started sketching screen layout ideas with great energy. If we do it this way, users should be able to reach their desired page with minimal effort. By arranging the menu with the actual screen size in mind, I think we can also reduce unnecessary eye movement. You've already put this much together? Actually, I tried out a few mock-up tools on my own and even made some A/B test style screens. Of course, this was just something I did on my own, so we still need to establish formal testing procedures. Mia continued working on the tablet, clearly enjoying herself. That's impressive. Honestly, it looks much more user-friendly than the current layout. I didn't expect you to have put so much thought into it. At my words, Mia whispered a small yes to herself. I tend to lose sight of my surroundings when I get into something I love. I really enjoy thinking about designs and creating UIs. But at my previous company, I would get overly excited and push ahead on my own. Before I knew it, I was isolated. Eventually, I couldn't stay there anymore, so I left. This time, I tried to keep a low profile, telling myself not to stand out. Her hesitant voice revealed a mixture of insecurity and a lingering complex. But when you told me to just be myself, I realized I don't have to keep holding back. Thank you. Her cheeks turned a faint shade of pink. Looking straight at me with a newfound confidence, she seemed much more self-assured than before. A month passed, and the office had fully regained its usual calm atmosphere. After overcoming the recent trouble, Mia, in particular, achieved significant results. Her proposed improvements dramatically boosted operational efficiency, earning her well-deserved recognition. Next Friday, we'll have an awards ceremony and a social gathering. It was Mr. Wilson, more enthusiastic than anyone, making the announcement. He probably wanted to turn the page on the previous incident while celebrating Mia's achievements. That's a bit much just for me, Mia said modestly, but the office was already buzzing with celebratory excitement. The atmosphere had completely changed from the chaos a month ago, now filled with bright, positive energy. Just then, Mia quietly approached my desk. "John, about next week's social gathering, would you come?" she asked while looking down slightly, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Me? I'm not really good with crowded places," I answered honestly, and Mia, looking a bit flustered, quickly continued. "I understand. I know you're busy, and I know it's a hassle for you to come to the office when you usually work from home. But could you, please?" Her voice grew a bit more assertive. "There's so much I want to ask you. About the system, the upcoming improvements. I've always wanted to consult with you, but I never got the chance. Like about the server configuration, the libraries used in the recent update, and also about load balancing around the network. I've been interested for a while, but I just didn't know who to talk to. You're only here 3 days a week, and I know you're busy, so I thought this might be my only chance." Mia's words kept pouring out as if she couldn't hold them back anymore. Her eyes conveyed just how serious she was about discussing technical matters. "Haha, that much, huh? You're making me feel a bit overwhelmed." I couldn't help but chuckle, slightly taken aback by her enthusiasm. But seeing her eyes light up with such passion, I couldn't find a reason to refuse. "And, I also want to properly thank you. I never got to fully express my gratitude." Her voice softened, trembling slightly with embarrassment. Seeing her like that made it even harder to say no. All right. I guess I'll go to the party." "Really? Oh, I'm sorry. I just got so happy." Mia's face lit up with a bright smile, clasping her hands together in front of her chest. It might have been the first time I'd seen her so genuinely joyful. "I'm really happy. Thank you so much. I'm sure everyone will be excited, though I might be the most." She added the last words in a slightly quieter voice, so soft that I would have missed it if I hadn't been listening carefully. Even so, that cheerful tone clearly reached my heart. "Well, it might not be so bad after all," I murmured to myself. I'm not usually fond of crowded places like parties, but with how earnestly she invited me, I couldn't refuse. Besides, seeing her genuinely happy about it didn't feel bad at all. A few days later, "Now then, let's raise a toast to celebrate Mia's achievements." With Mr. Wilson's enthusiastic call, the social gathering began. The voices of chatting employees echoed through the banquet hall of a luxury hotel. "John, you have to try this dish. It's delicious." Amelia, with a sultry voice, slid into the seat next to me. Her breath already carried the scent of alcohol. "Oh, really?" Even with my curt response, Amelia didn't give up. "Come on, Don't be so cold. How about I feed you some of this sashimi? I sighed inwardly. Glancing around the room, I noticed Mr. Wilson deep in conversation with Mia. Mia, you really did an amazing job. I'm truly grateful to have such a talented employee join our company. Mr. Wilson, his face slightly flushed, spoke warmly. Mia bowed politely, responding modestly. John, are you listening? Amelia clung to my arm. Sorry, I just need to use the restroom. I gently shook off her hand and stood up. Instead of the restroom, I headed to a small terrace connected to the banquet hall. The night breeze felt refreshing. Hey, John. I turned around at the sound of Mia's voice behind me. Standing on the terrace with the pleasant night air around me, I looked back. So this is where you were. I've been looking for you. Sorry, I just needed to escape for a bit. Amelia was being a bit persistent. When I said that with a wry smile, Mia let out a soft laugh. I saw that. You don't usually show your emotions, so it was kind of amusing. Yeah, I'm just not used to it. The lively chatter from the party could still be heard through the terrace doors. Tonight's social gathering was more festive than usual, especially with Mia receiving an award from President Wilson. Everyone seemed to be in high spirits. Amid that cheerful noise, Mia hesitated for a moment before speaking. It feels so nice to be accepted like this. If I hadn't met you, I think I would have stayed trapped in my shell. Her voice was soft, but there was a deep sincerity behind her words. When our eyes met, it felt like, just for that moment, the world around us fell completely silent. You don't have to exaggerate. You changed because of your own strength, right? I tried to downplay it, but Mia slowly shook her head. No, it was a big change for me. It's because you were there that I'm who I am now. A gentle breeze rustled her hair. Despite the distant laughter from the banquet, it felt like we were in a different, quieter world. As I looked at her, I quietly embraced the emotions welling up inside me. I used to choose remote work to avoid coming to the office, but lately I found myself looking forward to it. When I talk to Mia, it feels like I'm being pulled out of my shell. There's this strange sense of excitement. It's like her passion draws me in, stirring something inside me. I feel the same way. Honestly, I used to think coming to the office was a hassle. But lately, it doesn't feel that way anymore. I guess your enthusiasm is rubbing off on me. I ended up admitting it, feeling a bit embarrassed. Mia blinked in surprise, then gave me a gentle smile. Really? So, you're coming to the office because of me? No, it's just part of my work. But I guess talking to you makes it enjoyable, so I end up coming in more often. A brief silence followed. When I looked down, I noticed Mia's fingertips trembling slightly. I'm not exactly used to this kind of atmosphere either. But strangely, it doesn't feel unpleasant, rather, the gentle tension feels surprisingly comfortable. Thank you. Hearing you say that makes me feel a bit saved too. The moment I muttered those words, her fingertips brushed against the back of my hand. Whether it was intentional or just a coincidence, I couldn't tell. But just that brief touch made my heart pound. Neither of us said a word, nor did we move away. We just stood there for a few seconds, caught in the moment. The night breeze gently passed between us, rustling her hair. The distant sounds of music and chatter from the banquet felt far away, as if this place were a world of its own. Excuse me. Just then, the sound of the terrace door opening startled us. We instinctively pulled our hands apart. When I turned around, there stood Mr. Wilson, looking cheerful with his tie slightly loosened. Oh, there you are. I've been looking for you, Mia. Mr. Wilson, is something the matter? Mia replied, her voice slightly high-pitched. Mr. Wilson waved his hand with a big smile. We're moving on to the second party. It wouldn't be the same without you, Mia. We need you there. Yes, I'll be right there. We watched as Mr. Wilson hurried off, and then we glanced away from each other, feeling a bit awkward. But I noticed Mia stealing a quick glance at me, a small smile forming on her lips. Even though it was just a brief touch and a short exchange, the warmth it left in my heart hadn't faded. Shall we go back? Yeah, let's do that. With casual words, we left the terrace behind. The lively laughter from the party once again reached our ears. But the quiet, gentle glow from that brief moment remained firmly in both of our hearts. A few days later. Hey, I heard you're quite the popular guy lately. David popped his head into the development room, speaking in a teasing tone. What are you talking about? I tried to keep my voice calm, but I could tell it sounded slightly strained. Come on, man. Amelia's been all over you, and there's a rumor going around about you and Mia. It's nothing. They just hang around because of my position. It's always been that way. The words came out just like they used to back when I didn't really care. But even as I said them, I knew I wasn't the same as before. Actually, it felt pathetic to use those words to cover up how I really felt. The sound of my typing momentarily stopped. The brief silence somehow echoed in my heart. That's why working from home was comfortable. I didn't have to deal with unnecessary human relationships. But you've been coming to the office more often lately. David's words made my chest tighten a bit. People around me had noticed this change. Especially David, his gentle tone made it clear that he had been warmly watching over my shift, and that realization made my heart feel unexpectedly warm. Yeah. After a moment of thought, I answered honestly. It's partly because of work, but also, I just kind of want to be near Mia lately. As soon as I said it, I felt something inside me being set free. Oh! David's eyes lit up with excitement. That reaction gave me a mix of embarrassment and a strange sense of liberation. It's rare to see you like that. Since I started talking to Mia, it feels like my world has gradually changed. It's like colors are slowly seeping into what used to be a black and white landscape. It's not a dramatic transformation, but it's definitely a change happening within me. When I talk to her, I can't help but smile. Even when it's not about work, even the smallest conversations feel enjoyable. I've never thought talking with someone could be this fun. And recently, I realized something. The way I've kept my distance from people to protect myself. It might have actually been an incredibly narrow world. My fingers, resting on the keyboard, unconsciously tap out a rhythm. It's like a quiet melody of new feelings playing inside my heart. Until now, I was only thinking about staying safe inside the cage I built for myself. But when I took a step outside that cage, the world turned out to be much wider and warmer than I thought. My voice trembles a bit. But it's not out of embarrassment, it's the joy of finally facing my own truth. I see. David's voice carried a sense of deep relief and happiness. That single word made me feel the warmth of him accepting everything I had just confessed. At that moment, my phone rang. The screen displayed Mia. We had exchanged contact information just the other day. Feeling my heart race, I tapped to answer the call. Hello? John, help me. Mia's voice was trembling. And in the next moment, the call abruptly ended with a faint clicking sound. Mia? Mia. No matter how desperately I called out, there was no response. A cold shiver ran down my spine. What's wrong? David leaned in, looking concerned. I don't know. Mia sounded like she was calling for help, but then the call just cut off. As I tried to find the right words, panic started to cloud my mind. Just then, Amelia came rushing down the hallway, slightly out of breath. John, perfect timing. Just now, Mr. Wilson and Mia went into. Which floor was it again? That rarely used reception room. And the door's locked, it won't open. The door's locked. Which room? What's the room number? Amelia looked around as if trying to recall, then shouted. I think it's the old reception room on the 12th floor. It's hardly ever used. I tried to follow them, but the door was locked. The old reception room, that place still has a separate system locked due to security reasons. Mia, did she get called there? I immediately looked at David. Sensing the urgency, he quickly pulled out his phone. You know the system password? You have that certification, right? Of course. That room still has the old building's electronic lock, and you need to enter a code to open the door. Suppressing my growing anxiety, I dashed towards the emergency stairs. Amelia followed right behind me. Waiting for the elevator would take too long. The door's locked, which means Mr. Wilson might have. No way. Amelia, panting, glanced sideways at me. You don't think Mr. Wilson is forcing Mia? Calm down. We just need to hurry. As we raced up the emergency stairs, my heartbeat grew louder and faster. Mia's trembling voice from the phone wouldn't leave my mind. Even a second faster, I needed to make sure she was safe. When we reached the 12th floor, I stopped in front of the old door. I tried turning the handle, but it was firmly locked and wouldn't budge. This is it. The doorknob is completely locked. Amelia spoke breathlessly. Step back. I'll open the system screen. I quickly operated my smartphone and accessed the internal security management screen. Normally, only the General Affairs or Security Department would have access, but I hold a rare security network certification that only a handful of people worldwide possess. After all, I'm the one who built the internal system. There's no way I can't get through. I accessed the management screen, inputting several IDs and passwords. A small electronic beep sounded, and the red light turned green. All right, it should open now. There was a click as the door unlocked. Amelia gasped audibly. Let's go. When I pushed the door open, I saw Thomas and Mia in the dimly lit room. A heavy, oppressive atmosphere hung in the air. Usually calm and collected, Thomas now had a hardened expression I'd never seen before. Mia was pressed against the wall, looking pale and staring at us. Ah, John. Her voice was faint and trembling slightly. Seeing her like that filled me with an overwhelming sense of dread. Thomas, what are you thinking? Bringing Mia here in the dark and locking the door, it's insane. I tried to sound calm, but my voice came out low and rough. Mia looked at me with eyes pleading for help. What do you mean? What am I thinking? That's what I want to know, John. Who the hell are you anyway? Stop getting in my way. That single line sounded sharper than anything I'd ever heard from the usually mild-mannered Thomas. I could feel the tension in the room grow even tighter. Since college, you've always been good at everything. Things that everyone else struggled with, you just handled effortlessly. But when they asked me to be the president when we started the company, I finally felt like I had won. You stayed a regular employee, and I became president. I thought I had finally beaten you. His words spilled out, revealing the jealousy and frustration he had been bottling up for years. Dark feelings that he never showed in the office or meetings were now pouring out. Being asked to be president was great, but in the end, the company can't function without you. The critical systems and networks, all of it is in your hands. I'm just a figurehead, always in your shadow. So at the very least, I didn't want to lose Mia. As he forced out those words, his eyes were filled with a mix of inferiority and despair. I just couldn't bear to give Mia up too. You've taken the job, the reputation, everything. Every time I saw her looking at you, it drove me crazy with jealousy. His voice quivered, and his ragged breathing disturbed the silence in the room. Thomas, I understand how you've been feeling, but doing this won't help anyone, not Mia, not me, and not you. You're the president. There had to be a better way. I know that, but I couldn't stop it. This suffocating frustration inside me. Thomas's voice sounded on the verge of breaking down. Unable to hold back anymore, Mia spoke in a frail voice. Mr. Wilson, I really appreciate everything you've done for me, but being brought to a place like this with the door locked, I was really scared. Hearing those words, Thomas's head snapped up as if hit. He looked at Mia, desperate and regretful, but his eyes only reflected his guilt. Then Amelia, who had been standing quietly in the corner, took a step forward. She turned to Mr. Wilson, clenching her fists tightly as her voice trembled. Mr. Wilson, I always thought of you as a kind, albeit indecisive person. People often said you were just for show or too frivolous, but you were the one who recognized my abilities at work. You didn't just treat me like some pretty face, you encouraged me, saying I had talent in sales. I was really grateful for that. After spilling out her thoughts in one breath, Amelia, with a pained expression, looked straight at the downcast Thomas. "But seeing you corner a woman like this, I just can't accept it. I always thought you were someone who saved me. I never wanted to see you hurt someone like Mia." Her voice was filled with disappointment and sadness. Thomas raised his face slightly, as if trying to take in Amelia's words, but then dropped his gaze again, unable to respond. "Mia, are you okay? You must have been really scared just now. Let's go." Amelia took Mia's hand gently and pulled her close. When Mia looked up in surprise, Amelia nodded firmly and gently straightened Mia's slightly disheveled hair. "Thank you," Mia whispered weakly and let out a small sigh. Amelia gave a faint smile and led Mia toward the exit. "Thomas," I spoke in a low, steady voice, "I don't think your feelings are a lie. You liked Mia, didn't you? But you went about it completely the wrong way. As a president, or rather, as a human being, you crossed a line you should never have crossed." Thomas didn't respond, just clenched his trembling fists. He kept his head down, and I continued calmly. "It doesn't matter how you feel, whether you lack confidence or feel jealous of me. That's your own business. But dragging your employees into it? That's unacceptable. Right now, just take responsibility without making excuses." "Understood, John," Thomas murmured weakly, still standing motionless as if rooted to the spot. It was like he was trapped in place by the weight of the situation. I let out a deep sigh and walked away from him. Mia was lying down quietly in another reception room. After being accompanied by Amelia, she seemed exhausted, but now she looked relieved, covered with a blanket and resting her eyes. I had called the medical staff just in case, but fortunately, there were no physical injuries. For now, that was a relief, but emotional support would be essential. After making sure Mia was resting, I found Amelia waiting in the hallway. I gave her a slight nod. "Thanks. I really appreciate you supporting Mia." Amelia almost turned away with a slightly proud look, but her expression softened a bit as she shrugged. "It's nothing. I just did what anyone would do. I couldn't just ignore that situation." Though her tone sounded a bit irritated, she let out a deep breath, clearly relieved. Her expression was different from her usual flashy demeanor. There was a seriousness that showed she truly cared. Actually, during the second party for Mia's celebration, Mr. Wilson was acting really strange. He kept trying to get close to Mia, so I was watching him carefully. Then, I saw them go into that quiet reception room together, and when the door closed, it locked. "I see." A chill ran through me as I thought about it. If Amelia hadn't noticed Mr. Wilson's odd behavior at that moment, if she hadn't realized that the door was locked, Mia might have faced an even more dangerous situation. Honestly, I'm really grateful you were there. I don't even want to think about what could have happened. When I said that, Amelia looked a little embarrassed and glanced away. "Well, usually I'm just the loud one at parties, but I just wanted to be helpful. I mean, despite everything, I really do like this company." As she spoke with a shy smile, I couldn't help but let out a breath of relief. Then, Amelia shifted her gaze awkwardly and started to speak again, hesitantly. "By the way, at first, everyone treated Mia like a star because of her looks. That really got on my nerves, and I was pretty harsh to her." She bit her lip, struggling to get the words out, but I could sense a mix of embarrassment and sincerity in her tone. But it's weird, right? At first, Mia was so quiet, but then she started giving input on other people's work too. Kind of nosy, really, but somehow, I ended up not being able to hate her. Amelia let out a wry smile and gave a small shrug. I couldn't help but smile back and nod. I get it. She looks kind of cool on the outside, but in reality, she's passionate and tends to get involved. I don't dislike that about her, right? And she's actually really good at her job. She's not just a pretty face, unlike me. Amelia lowered her gaze, a hint of self-deprecation in her expression. I could sense a slight trace of loneliness on her face. I softened my tone a bit, trying to encourage her. That's not true. I know how hard you work. Since I started coming to the office more, I've noticed. Your achievements may not always be visible in the numbers, but, for example, the other day when that new sales guy was struggling, you quietly helped him out, didn't you? At first, he was completely overwhelmed, but after you gave him advice, his performance started improving. That kind of support behind the scenes is crucial, even if it goes unnoticed. Wait, you saw that? Amelia blinked in surprise. I nodded and continued earnestly. Your name might not come up in the sales results, but I'm sure that Rookie's growth is thanks to you. I've seen how you pay attention to those around you. Thank you. Wow, I almost feel like crying. Amelia hesitated for a moment, closing her mouth as if at a loss for words. But then she looked up again with a warm smile. Her expression was genuine and filled with relief. You know, John, you always seem a bit clumsy with words, but then out of nowhere you say something really kind. Is that so? I'm just saying what I think is normal. Somehow, that cheered me up a little. Thank you. She wiped the corners of her eyes slightly as she spoke. By the way, you're into Mia too, right? Huh? Her unexpected remark left me momentarily speechless. Amelia grinned slyly. There's a rumor going around the office, you know? I mean, you two just seem to click so well, no wonder people are curious. At first, I didn't like it, but after what happened, I kind of get it now. No, it's not like that. I'm not really. Aha, nailed it. I guess I should find myself a good guy too. Oh wait, isn't David still single? With a mischievous smile, Amelia lightened her tone and walked down the hallway. About a week after that incident, Thomas openly confessed his misconduct at the board meeting. He spoke openly about locking Mia in the reception room and the jealousy and frustration that led him to do it. Without hiding anything, he bowed deeply. The board members exchanged glances and eventually nodded with stern expressions. Mr. Wilson, this incident is far too serious. You will have to resign from your position as president. Do you agree? Yes, I sincerely apologize once again. Despite being one of the founding members, Thomas had let his long-held inferiority complex crush him, and in the end, he chose to walk away from it all. Just before leaving the room, Thomas glanced back at me, squeezing out his words. One day, I will come back as someone who can proudly call himself your junior again. I'll work hard to be accepted as a colleague once more definitely. He bowed deeply once more, then walked out of the building, biting his lip. The employees watching his departure couldn't hide their mixed feelings of frustration and sadness. A man consumed by jealousy and insecurity, choosing to leave the company. His final words carried a clumsy but sincere resolve. Since the company couldn't remain leaderless, the board immediately needed to appoint a new president. And that's when they turned to me. Though I preferred working remotely and freely, the board unanimously decided that the company now needs his leadership and technical skills. Well, I guess I have no choice. I muttered as I sat down in the president's chair. Honestly, I didn't feel suited for management, and I wasn't confident about leading people. But David and the other employees strongly encouraged me. They all agreed that I was the best choice to help rebuild the company after the turmoil caused by Thomas's incident. It was time to leave behind the version of myself that kept to the sidelines and step into the spotlight. I had to make up my mind. The first few days after taking office as president were a whirlwind. With Thomas gone, all the decision-making processes left vacant, as well as countless internal inquiries, suddenly fell on me. On top of that, I still had ongoing development projects, making every day incredibly hectic. Even so, thanks to David and the other board members supporting me, I was managing to keep up. Who would have thought you, the president? Life sure is unpredictable. One day during lunch, David popped into my office with a teasing smile. It's hectic, but, well, it's fulfilling in its own way. By the way, what's going on with Amelia, the one who's been bothering you? David hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting around. Then he shrugged with a wry smile. Well, the other day, she asked me out for dinner. So we're going to meet up soon. I mean, who would have thought Amelia, of all people? Honestly, I'm just as surprised. Wait, seriously? You're not joking, right? When I reacted with genuine surprise, David hurriedly waved his hands, looking flustered, and said, "No, no, nothing's set in stone yet. It's just a casual meal, really. But since then, she's been steadily improving her sales performance, so maybe she's in a good place. Her flashy looks and easygoing attitude haven't changed, but it seems like her skills are finally catching up. Well, I don't really dislike her, so who knows, something might happen." Really? I never thought you'd have something like that going on. When I teased him, David scratched his nose, clearly a bit embarrassed. That gesture hadn't changed since our student days, and it made me feel a bit nostalgic. "So, how about you? You're pretty busy now as president, but what's going on with Mia since then?" "Me? Since I became president, Mia's been kind of distant. She doesn't talk to me as casually as she used to." As I said that, memories from the other day came to mind. Since recovering from the incident, Mia had gradually regained her energy. She continued to come up with efficiency improvement ideas, showing her usual competence, but still, she seemed to be holding back a bit. Well, it makes sense. I mean, her close colleague suddenly became the president. It's only natural she wouldn't know how to approach you. I get it, but I didn't think she'd hold back this much. I just wish she'd talk to me more easily like before. When I pouted a bit, David laughed and said, "Being president is tough, huh?" It was true. Ever since I took on this role, I had become more aware of how delicate human relationships could be. When I was just focused on technology, I didn't have to worry about things like this. After an afternoon meeting, as I walked down the hallway, I spotted Mia at just the right moment. She was holding some documents, seemingly having just finished some interdepartmental work, and let out a small sigh. "Hey Mia, you doing okay? That meeting earlier seemed pretty intense." "Oh, President Taylor, I mean John. Yes, I'm fine. I received a lot of feedback, so I'll be reworking the improvement plan." Even after giving a presentation, she was still smiling, not showing a hint of fatigue. She's as resilient as ever. But I couldn't help but notice a slight tension in her expression. I glanced around, making sure the area was relatively quiet, and lowered my voice. "Got a minute? I need to talk to you. It's not anything serious." "Oh, yes, of course." I guided her to the landing of the stairs, a quiet space away from interruptions. As the door closed, the slightly cool air brushed against my skin. Mia looked at me with a bit of nervousness in her eyes. "You know, lately, when I come to the office, you seem kind of distant. You're not as relaxed as before." "Am I? I've been trying my best, but it's hard to casually approach someone who's now the president." She looked down apologetically. Since I became president, she's been like this, cautious and formal. Just a few months ago, we used to joke around and talk about tech without a second thought. "So, here's the deal. If you keep being distant, I'll have to cut your pay." That's an order from the president. "What? That's too harsh. Isn't that a bit unreasonable?" Mia's eyes widened in surprise. Her expression was so adorable that I almost couldn't help but laugh. But I didn't want to let the moment slip, so I quickly got to the point. "Also, as a presidential order, I'd like you to go out for dinner with me after work. And well, it's hard to put into words, but I'd like us to date, as a couple." It wasn't the smoothest confession, but it was how I truly felt. Mia's expression softened from surprise to something warmer, almost affectionate. "Date with me?" She hesitantly asked for confirmation. Her cheeks were slightly flushed, and I could see a hint of tears glimmering in her eyes. "Yeah, that's right. Also, the pay cut thing was just a joke. But seriously, stop holding back around me, whether it's work or personal stuff. Just be honest. I think things will work out better that way." Mia was momentarily at a loss for words, her lips slightly parted. Then, suddenly, a tear slipped down her cheek. "Oh, sorry. I'm just really happy. It's strange to cry at a time like this, right?" Her voice was a mix of relief and joy. She hurriedly wiped her tears with her sleeve, but the corners of her eyes still glistened. It was as if all the tension she'd been holding in had finally melted away. It's not strange. I'm not used to this kind of thing either. And I'm really embarrassed right now. A smile naturally broke across my face. Seeing that Mia, still caught between laughing and crying, gradually seemed to calm down and looked at me directly. Thank you. This is the first time I've ever felt so happy. No, thank you. Just talk to me more casually from now on. Being called President Taylor is more than enough just for work. Okay, I understand. John. She wiped away the last of her tears and gave a shy smile. Watching her like that, a warm feeling spread through my chest. And so, we took our first step together. Not just as a president and a subordinate, but as two people who truly care for each other as a couple. Of course, there would still be many challenges and work ahead, but together, I knew we could overcome them. That thought filled me with confidence.